I want to go across to Mr. Jim O'Neill. He's a British economist. He's best known for coming up with the acronym BRICS, or Brazil, Russia, India, China, and of course eventually South Africa got joined to it. But he came up with the acronym BRIC in 2001. And that was for the fastest growing emerging economies at that time. Of course, a lot has changed in the last 20-25 years. Thank you very much, Mr. Jim O'Neill, for speaking with us. So BRICS seems to be, the acronym that you coined 20-25 years ago, Brazil, Russia, India, China, now seems to be, at least from the point of view of the likes of Donald Trump, the US president, a bit of a bad name, some would say, because he's been railing and ranting against BRICS. Earlier this week, we had pictures from Tianjin in China, where at least 3 of these countries and the leaders of India, China, and Russia are gathered together. What is your view about what's been going on, not just in the coming together of these 3 countries, Russia, India, and China, but also this renewed interest and this antagonism coming from the White House towards BRICS?
Well, I actually wrote something for Project Syndicate about 3 weeks ago, in which I facetiously suggested that maybe Donald Trump is a secret agent for the BRICS, because he never stops talking about them, which itself lends more credibility than any other previous US president for the past 25 years. It's the first time I've ever heard any US leader publicly making any reference to them. And then secondly, by introducing the extremely high tariffs against Brazil, and then following through with what to most objective observers around the world would regard as extremely peculiar sanctions against India, he's effectively encouraging the BRICS to treat each other a lot more seriously than they have done ever since they first met as a political grouping. So I think Trump is doing the BRICS countries almost a deliberate favor to try and make them work more closely together at the expense of the US. And unless there's some very, very strange, clever, subtle logic going on, I have no understanding as to why Trump is doing all of this. And I would imagine long-time experienced US diplomats must be pretty horrified.
Now, it's difficult to, and especially in the case of Trump, it's very difficult to find rational arguments as to why he's doing what he's doing. But is there any, best possible explanation for why he's doing this? Because it only further pushes India towards Russia and China's corner and away from America's corner, away from the West's corner. So what's the best possible logical explanation, if any, for why Trump is doing what he's doing?
Well, in particular, I'll take your question the other way around. I mean, I have written extensively and repeatedly in recent years that I don't really believe the BRICS leaders have ever successfully achieved much together as a political grouping. And the prime reason being is that China and India, of course, have never really treated each other very seriously. And yet, on the back of these moves, we have Modi visiting Beijing, I think, for the first time in 7 years, and is seen on pictures all over the world being extremely friendly with President Xi and with, of course, Mr. Putin. So that is a direct consequence of Trump's actions, and obviously, on a more subtle basis, is his own claim for being so important in solving the Indian-Pakistan dispute of earlier this year. But as to whether there's any logic I can think of, it boils down to Trump's strange personality, in that he just lashes out at countries that have offended him. And I think, from what I can tell, obviously in Brazil it's pretty straightforward. He doesn't like the way the Brazilian judicial system is treating Bolsonaro. And seemingly in India, it's even crazier. He seems to not like the fact that India doesn't give him public credit for his role in the end of the, at least for now, the Indian-Pakistan dispute. And it's really very petty. But to be honest, it's quite typical of how we often see Donald Trump behaving. but strategically, it's a very, very, very strange thing for Trump to have done or not being encouraged to stop, given that the US and many other Western countries have made a conscious effort to try and have India playing this, let's call it, neutralizing role inside the BRICS. And of course, to exaggerate the strangeness of it, he has yet to really do anything much to China. In fact, he keeps on postponing the time of any serious more sanctions, and he hasn't done anything to Russia. So, hence my sort of tongue-in-cheek piece about whether he is in fact a secret agent for the BRICS, because he seems to be doing lots of things to try and help them become more important.
But, Mr. Neil, you also referenced about this earlier, that BRICS as an entity or a concept, it's been around for a very long time, 20 plus years now. It's been around for more than 2 decades. And inherently, they have not succeeded. And the reason why they've not succeeded beyond a point is because there are political problems. For example, between India and China, we have the unsettled boundary issue, which led to very violent military clashes 5 years ago. That because of that contested border. There is also inherent suspicions. But that's on the political side, that's on the military side. Even on the trade front, can these countries become markets for each other? Because ultimately China produces a lot of the world's stuff. India also produces a lot. Is there some scope for India to take in some of for China to take in some of the Indian imports, given that Trump has imposed tariffs on these Indian imports? And can there be vice versa? Can China, for example, be a substitute for the American market?
The simple answer is yes. If you look at global economic growth in the now near 25 years since I created the acronym, China has contributed as much to global domestic demand as has the United States, about 40% each. And the rest has come from a small number or many other countries, most of it being quite small. But actually, the third largest contributor is probably India. And so if you have China, despite all its problems, continue to grow at 5%, which is at least more than twice America, and India growing at 6 to 7%, their contribution to the world as we go forward will be even bigger. And here's the central part related to your question, if China, India in particular, consciously tried to do a lot more trade with each other, then it could be transformative to both their own trade relationships, but actually, given their growing economic importance, certainly to the rest of Asia, and as a result of that, indirectly and directly also to the rest of the world. Because at the end of the day, as big as the United States is, it is only 25% of global GDP.
And finally, Mr. O'Neill, do you see any sort of comeback from this situation? Is there any sort of trajectory that you see where Trump is sort of forcing his tariffs on the rest of the world, and there is some kind of comeback mechanism or comeback path, formula, if you will, for India to revive its relationship with the United States?
It might sound crazy, but I'm not sure that Donald Trump has thought any of this through whatsoever, because he just seems to shoot from the hip. I met with some pretty senior Indian diplomats soon after Modi's visit to Washington earlier in the year, and they certainly were of the expectation that they'd get a very favorable trade deal right up there with the best. And something, probably the things I touched on, have changed all of that in the interim, and it's just Trump's emotion. So I would guess that at some point, and here as on so many other fronts, how the opinion polls go with respect to the midterm elections, and if they continue to deteriorate for Trump, which importantly they are, I would guess that at some point, some people in the Republican Party will stop being so scared of everything that Trump tells them to do, and we start to see more internal democratic constraints on Trump, especially on things that don't seem particularly wise from an international diplomacy front, in addition to perhaps on the domestic economic front as well.
All right, Mr. Jim O'Neill, thank you very much for joining us. He's the father of the acronym BRIC. In fact, it went on to become BRICS, and now BRICS has become a bit of a, for want of a better phrase, a bad word in the Trump lexicon. But it seems like Trump's actions are furthering the cement of the relationship between Russia, India, China, and South Africa.